Stay dry overnight, and Northern Ireland will turn dry after midnight. Temperatures actually rising in many places through the night. We start the weekend in double digits. We also start with a fair bit of rain around. Still some heavy rain for Wales and southwest England, especially first thing. That rain will move eastward, so eventually turning up across East Anglia and the southeast during the morning and then head out into the North Sea. It may linger across the easternmost parts of England and Scotland until around dusk. It'll be followed by drier, brighter weather for a time, and then the showers get going. Lots of heavy showers zipping through on that gusty wind come the afternoon. Temperatures actually dropping a little through the afternoon as well, so feeling cooler than it has done, especially with the wind, and especially if you get caught in a downpour, of which there will be plenty more to come through Saturday evening. A showery night. It gets very windy once more in the north of Scotland. And that leads into a blustery, gusty day on Sunday with further heavy showers to come, particularly for Wales and southern England. Could be quite a wet day for parts of the southeast. Northeast England, southern Scotland, northeastern Scotland may not see too many showers actually. So here, by and large, it could be a mostly dry day. And there will be sunny spells elsewhere between the showers, but those showers will keep coming on that gusty wind. Temperatures down close to average, but feeling cooler with the wind.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, strikes are happening all around us at the moment, aren't they? Now, there's outrage, though, because Rishi is introducing, or trying to at least, what many are calling anti-strike laws, where basically you'd have to have minimum service levels in sectors like health, for example. Is he right or is he wrong? And get this, the latest census questioned us all for the first time about our gender identity, and it seems that 250,000 people, I bet it would be much more actually if you did it again as of right now, but anyway, 250,000 people as of then identified as a different gender from their sex at birth. What on earth do you think is going on? And I have to say, don't ever let it be said that we don't get into the big cultured stuff here on GB News. I want to talk to you tonight, it is Friday after all, about the Elgin marbles. The row has rumbled on for centuries. I'm asking, do you think it's time to give them back or not? And, oh, you know me, if you watch this show often, don't you? I cannot bear talking about the lunacy that is Prince Harry and his recent antics. But one on my panel tonight, he looks an awful lot like him, so I thought it'd be a bit rude if I didn't get into that story. I'm joined tonight by Paul Embry and Alex Dean. We'll get into all of that and more, but before I do so, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. It's 6:02. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. A senior Taliban leader has hit back at Prince Harry, saying the militants he claims to have killed in Afghanistan were not chess pieces, they were humans. He was responding to revelations from the Duke of Sussex's memoir, Spare, in which he admits to killing 25 Taliban fighters while he was a helicopter pilot. The book is due to be published next week, but mistakenly went on sale in Spain yesterday. In it, Prince Harry also reveals he found out his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had died via a news website and not from his family. Royal expert Charles Ray says the book could be the end of Harry's relationship with the royal family.
These are machine gun revelations and accusations, and it is staggering that he's come out with all this stuff. I mean, to a point of being disgusting with some of the revelations. I don't believe that Harry's ever going to be forgiven for doing what he's done with this book. I mean, the documentaries and the Oprah Winfrey were bad enough, but this book is way out there, really is.
Ambulance members with the union Unite have announced a new strike date on the 23rd of January in a dispute over pay. More than 2,600 ambulance workers in the West Midlands, North West, North East, East Midlands and Wales will be involved in the walkout. It's amid rising flu cases and record-high ambulance handover delays. Over 40% of patients waited more than half an hour to be transferred to A&E last week, while an average of 5,000 flu patients were in hospital. That's up 47% on the previous week. Well, the Prime Minister has invited union leaders to meet with him to discuss pay on Monday. Rishi Sunak says he hopes for a grown-up conversation about what's affordable. It comes as passengers experience the fourth consecutive day of train strikes in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Only 20% of services operating as normal, but Mr Sunak says the government will try and ensure some services continue during industrial action.
We're going to bring forward new laws in common with countries like France, Italy, Spain and others that ensure that we have minimum levels of safety in critical areas like fire, like ambulance, so that even when strikes are going on, you know that your health will be protected. I think that's entirely reasonable, and that's what our new laws will do.
Well, the RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch says he doesn't think the new proposals will work.
They've also lost the argument on the existing anti-trade union laws because every union is defeating them by having mass ballots. They want to make the action that comes out of those ballots virtually illegal. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they understand what they're doing. They keep quoting what goes on in France and Spain and all the rest of the world. These laws have never been enforced in those countries, and they're not enacted in the same way that Grant Shapps is trying to bring in.
Police in Scotland have named 2 women and a man who died in a fire at a hotel in Perth. Donna Vance van Rensburg, Sharon McLean and Keith Russell were killed in the blaze at New County Hotel in the early hours of Monday morning. The 2 women are sisters from Aberdeen and the man was originally from Edinburgh. Donna's 3-year-old King Charles Spaniel also died in the fire. The investigation into the cause is ongoing. And a postman who killed his girlfriend's 18-month-old son has been jailed for 9 years. A 24-year-old Christian Scott Coombe was found guilty of assaulting Andrew Corker before killing him in 2019. The child's mother, Tamika Beaton, was found guilty of child cruelty by neglecting to protect her son and given a 12-month sentence. The US president will mark the 2nd anniversary of the attack on the US Capitol with an award ceremony at the White House. President Joe Biden will award 12 people with the Presidential Citizens Medal, one of the country's highest honours for civilians. It'll be given to law enforcement officers, election workers, state and local officials. It follows a mob of Donald Trump supporters who stormed the building in a failed bid to block Congress from certifying the 2020 election. And former Chelsea striker and manager Gianluca Vialli has died from cancer at the age of 58. Vialli earned 59 caps for Italy and won the Champions League with Juventus before joining Chelsea in 1996. He was the first Italian to take charge of a Premier League side, becoming Blues manager in 1998. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Bethany. Well, I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening, and alongside me I've got the political consultant Alex Dean and the fireman and proud trade unionist and author Paul Embry. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Happy New Year, the first time I've seen you this year. And you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three here, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? I want your thoughts on all the things that we'll be getting into, whether it's strikes and the new so-called anti-strike laws, the whole kind of gender thing that was on in the census, the most recent census. Apparently 250,000 people don't identify their gender with their biological sex. What's going on with that one? And also, seen as look at him, Paul Embry, you've got to admit, haven't you, everyone, that he does look a lot like Prince Harry.
More hair.
You could moonlight, I think, as a Harry lookalike and make a small fortune.
So unfair.
What's unfair? It's true.
I'm 10 years older, by the way.
You could still get away with it. Some of these lookalikes I've seen, I mean, you see them and you're like, what? Who? What? You know, people blind? Anyway, I do think you look a lot like him, and for that reason and that reason only, I am going to indulge the whole Harry thing for a little bit at the end of the show. If you're a regular viewer, you will know I have so little interest in that topic and story. It is just beyond ridiculous now, but just for you, I shall indulge it before the end of the programme. Get in touch with all your thoughts, gbviews at gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Lots of you have been getting involved already. Michelle, says Tony, these are not anti-strike laws. Stop calling them that. People can still strike, but this is all about putting the public first. We'll be coming on to that story in just a second. What else are you getting in touch with? Oh, you're saying about the Elgin marbles. You're saying give them their proper name, Michelle.
Elgin marbles.
Well, there you go. I think this is going to spawn quite an interesting debate. Carol says this argument has gone on for years. They're not ours. Give them back. And anyway, who cares? I found that an interesting question. Who does care? Do you care about the Elgin marbles, the argument that's rumbled on for centuries, quite frankly? Is it your thing or not? And one of the things that always makes me laugh very much is you guys critiquing the way that I look. I find it fascinating. Nigel says, I look very posh tonight in my jacket. I appreciate that, Nigel. Lots of other people don't agree. Ken says, your jacket, Michelle, that you're wearing tonight makes you look like a surfer. Someone else has said, finally, we've discovered where my mother's velvet curtains from the 80s went. They've been turned into a jacket for Michelle. I love this. One of these days, I'm going to get you guys to send me your outfit so I can critique it in return. It's only fair, isn't it? If you're listening, not watching, just take it from me. I look fantastic, basically. Right, let's get into our top story, shall we? Strikes. And more strikes. Have you noticed that all around you? Well, Rishi Sunak, apparently, he's going to try and get on top of some of this going forward. The anti-strike law, so-called, basically what it would mean is that unions would have to continue, or at least go on to provide a minimum level of service. This would be, for example, things like the health industry, but it would be beyond that, transport, the nuclear industry, and so on and so forth. I'll cut straight to the chase, Paul. Do you support these laws?
No.
Well, they're not laws yet, but you know what I mean, the proposals.
And I think all it's going to do is inflame the situation. We already have, let's not forget, some of the most restrictive trade union laws in the world in this country. If Rishi Sunak and the government think that effectively forcing union members to abandon a strike for which they've democratically voted and walk across picket lines to provide a service while their colleagues are still on the picket line outside, then frankly, Rishi Sunak does not understand the essence of trade unionism. He does not understand the principle of worker solidarity. I do not know, and I've been on strike as a firefighter and a union member, I do not know any colleague, any fellow union member who would walk across a picket line in an attempt to undermine the strike that we're undertaking. So rather than resorting to these kind of measures, which frankly are going to take industrial relations in this country back to a period of over 100 years ago or more, where there were very few workplace rights, where the idea of taking industrial action at all was regarded as kind of inherently illegitimate. That's not the way to resolve these strikes. The way to resolve the strikes is to recognise that the people taking to picket lines have got a genuine grievance. They're being asked to pay for a financial crisis they didn't create, and to reach settlements in those sectors and to reach fair settlements. That's the resolution.
Do you think worker solidarity and the whole union mentality, the whole scab thing and all the rest of it, do you think that's more important than public safety?
Well, I think you could make that case about any strike, couldn't you? I mean, you could effectively...
I'm not making a case, I'm asking you a question. Do you think worker solidarity is more important than public safety?
Well, but the question is, Michelle, who's undermining that public safety in the first place? It's not...
No, that's not my question. My question is...
No, but that is the key
solidarity...
point. No, but that
No, my question is worker solidarity more important than public safety?
Yeah, but the implicit within your question is the idea that public safety is being jeopardised by the people taking strike action. And
it is.
What I'm saying, actually, the key point is the fact that they're taking strike action and the grounds on which they're taking strike action legitimate or not. And it's clearly legitimate because...
So you're not going to answer my question?
Well, no, I did answer it. I just didn't answer it in the way you wanted me to answer it. Because the alternative, therefore, is to say to workers, OK, you must never fight back, because if you're in an industry which could impact potentially on public safety, then you've got to do what the government tells you every time. You've got to accept what the government throws at you or the employer throws at you. You've got to accept, you've got to suck up these appalling
for my question. Viewers at home could be the judge.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Alex Dean.
I'd expected to talk about something else on the strikes, but listening to Paul, there's a flip side to the argument he just made about solidarity, which is there's something slightly sinister if you don't know anybody who might be willing to cross a picket line. It does suggest that rather than just solidarity, there might be an element of bullying of those who people have called scabs or willing to go back to work or think that the deal is good enough and want to return to work. And that's the flip side of some of this union discussion. After all, 2 of the 3 rail unions, which is one of the strike areas we've been talking about recently, have voted to return. But Mick Lynch is effectively holding them hostage and saying, no, I'm willing to strike until the summer. Now put that into the context of a band of brothers of solidarity in the way that Paul describes things, the fire service or elsewhere. You know, it would take a lot of guts to say, actually, I'm willing to cross the picket line. In fact, you're more likely, as we've seen with some postal workers, to leave, to say, forget it. I'm actually, you know, I won't use these words, I might not put it in these terms, but I'm getting bullied, actually, to say that you're not one of us if you don't stay with the strike. And I think that's quite concerning. Anyway, I think the bigger issue here isn't the laws that are being proposed by government. I think the biggest issue here is what it touches on what I've just said, is trying to ensure that the leaders of strikes actually represent the views of those on whose behalf they are tub thumping. Mick Lynch, says he's willing to strike indefinitely. Is that what his members really want? I think in a democracy we should try to ensure that our unions are truly democratic. Paul calls that tight union laws. I just call it basic fairness.
Well, you can't support, Alex, the principle of union democracy only when it suits you, because you think, there might be a deal that the members will be prepared to accept and the leadership are not letting them vote on it, which I don't think is true, by the way. I think all the evidence shows that the RMT members are massively behind their leadership on this. But in terms of picket lines, why don't you extend your argument about democracy to picket lines? Because ultimately, if at the end of the day you as a union member have taken part in a democratic ballot to take strike action, now, it may well be that a minority of members didn't necessarily agree with that decision, but that doesn't automatically say that in principle it's right to break the strike and to walk across the picket line. If you join a union and agree to take part in its internal democracy and the majority of members vote for a democratic ballot...
You're attacking a straw man, Paul. I never
that.
argued for the things that you're suggesting I did. No, I didn't. I said there was something menacing. I think there was something menacing about you saying that you can't imagine or you've never known anyone who wanted to.
Do you think somebody who doesn't agree with the strike, but nonetheless is a union member and took part in the ballot,
and now,
cross
ironically, you're now asking me if I hold the view you already ascribed to me, which the answer is no. Right? I think the government is entitled to hire new people, non-union members, to come in and do your jobs.
So you agree that you shouldn't cross picket lines?
Yeah,
we're together on that. You shouldn't cross.
I believe in losers' consent in unions, as I believe in losers' consent in democracy.
Well, hang on, I disagree with a pair of you then. If somebody is not, they've joined the union, they perhaps, I don't know, they might have voted in the first round perhaps, but not in the second round. It's gone on a bit too long and actually I'm over it now. I want to change my mind. I do think, actually, that they've got the right to be able to say, no, my personal circumstances, I need the money, I can't afford more lost earning days, I'm going to cross that picket line.
They have a legal right to do it, and by law there's nothing that a trade union can do in terms of sanctioning a member who chooses not to.
So you take action outside of the law?
Well, no, I'm not suggesting you take action.
Personally, obviously,
I'm simply making the point that if you belong to a democratic organisation which is voted to take industrial action, strike action, then as a member of that organisation who took part in the ballot, you should respect that vote. It seems to me to be a simple...
That point is a reasonable one, but you test a government at your peril, as Ronald Reagan showed when the air traffic controllers went on strike in the United States, thinking that they could hold government to ransom. And Reagan, in the end, dismissed them and appointed new people to run air traffic control. Let's talk about the areas the government is talking about with these proposals. I think that whilst we agree that people have a right to withdraw their labour, I think there's an interesting question. When you sign up to work in a vital service, I think you have to accept certain things. The idea, for example, that qualified staff at a nuclear facility in this country should, in theory, be able to walk out en masse is a crazy proposition to me, because they cannot be immediately replaced for safety purposes. And if collectively we are in a soup, thanks to strikers, you can ask the much put-upon squaddy to drive a van. You cannot ask him to run the power station.
The logical conclusion of your position, Alex, essentially is that workers, even during a cost of living crisis, when inflation is at 9 or 10% or whatever, and they've been offered 2 or 3%, and they're really struggling to make ends meet, to pay their mortgages, to pay their energy bills, they've gone through a democratic ballot, they've voted to take industrial action. Your whole argument is actually, workers, you should be forced to accept the offer that's on the table from the employer or the government, because you seem to think that in principle strike action is wrong, or certainly in the cases that have been highlighted, strike action is wrong. So in other words, force workers to accept what is on the table in front of them. And if they do try to fight back, as in this case, they've had democratic ballots and they've smashed those ballots and they're taken to their picket lines in their thousands, do you know what we'll do? We'll change the rules halfway through. A bit like a boxing match where, you know, the other person's landing a blow on you. Do you know what? We'll make him fight with one hand behind his back. That's exactly your argument.
No, it isn't. I don't agree with the government on it either. You spend a lot of time telling other people what they think. My view is that we shouldn't allow certain areas to unionise. It's a different position.
To even unionise?
Correct.
So not just not to strike, but to even belong to...
There are some areas I wouldn't allow to unionise. Correct.
When you go on strike as a firefighter, just help my viewers understand what kind of service remains. So if you guys, you ballot, you're off you go, you say if you're in your union, you've got to adhere to that, strike, respect it. What kind of service level remains?
Well, under the legislation governing the fire service, the 2004 Fire and Rescue Services Act, every local fire authority, because obviously there isn't a national fire service except in Scotland, but the rest of the UK is divided up into local fire services. They are required to provide a contingency service in the event of normal operational service not being available, so a pandemic, industrial action and so on. What they often do is contract it out to a private company who would bring in a minimum service. Years ago, we used to see the old green goddesses, the army, come in, but that doesn't really happen anymore. Or they will often rely on a few senior officers walking across picket lines and undermining the strike.
How do you feel as a striking fire officer as you look and see a fire?
Well, I mean, I certainly don't know anybody who, if they were on a picket line during a fire strike and saw a fire taking place over the road, would not leave the picket line.
Maybe that was too literal. Maybe you can't see it. You get a report of it. Would you go and put it out?
Look, I don't know a single firefighter who, if they were told that there was a fire that they could attend because a report has reached them.
So what's the point of your strike?
Well, because the whole point of the strike is those reports don't get made to the local fire station because they've withdrawn their labour. So I don't think that situation would ever apply.
So the government should just keep sending you the calls and then you put them out?
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
you fixed it. You fixed the issue. What professions or sectors, industries, whatever, do you think shouldn't be allowed to be unionised?
Well, the people who run nuclear power stations. That was my example. That was the one I was thinking
Fire
about.
service.
No, I'd allow almost every other service. I'd allow to.
Health service.
I don't
of course
think you should be able to strike. I don't think that critical life-saving services should be allowed to go on strike. So I would say firefighters shouldn't be able to en masse. Police already can't, but police, firefighters, ambulance crews, nurses, etc. I don't think you should be allowed to strike.
Let me throw this back to you then, Michelle. In circumstances where, now, OK, you may not agree with the current wave of strike action, but in circumstances where you felt that workers in those essential services were being dealt a rough deal and they had exhausted negotiations, they'd gone through every hoop that had been put before them, and still the government or the employer was not willing to make a reasonable offer, the logical conclusion that you've just set out there is just suck it up, guys. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah,
it's the ultimate weapon, isn't it?
When you go into those kind of services, I imagine, I'm not in them, so you tell me, but I imagine that you choose that as a vocation as opposed to a way and a means to get wealthy. So I think that when you go into lots of those vocations, you already appreciate, actually, I'm not going to be a Jeff Bezos type earner anytime soon. So I would appreciate the salary restrictions on entering that profession, point one. Point two, if it got to the point where really and truly I felt, actually, this is too much, I can't afford to live, I think a lot of firefighters have second jobs anyway, I suspect, to top up their income.
Often that's not our choice, to be fair. It's because they're struggling to get by and they feel the need to supplement their income.
But then if it really got too much, I'd leave and go get a different job.
Yeah, but it's easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, in a situation where we're just about to enter a recession, just telling people when they've got mortgages and families, I'll just leave and go and find another job, it really isn't that simple. I mean, don't underestimate the anguish that firefighters and other essential workers go through when they take this action.
Well, then let's talk about that anguish, because you're not just you're not comparing, sunshine roses and pay rises with anguish felt by emergency workers. The flip side to your strike is, let's remove it from the personal, the flip side of a healthcare strike is that it's impossible to imagine it won't have a bad effect on patient outcomes. If ambulance drivers and nurses strike, it's impossible to think that you're not going to, because of what they do, right? We spend all this time rightly saying what they do is so important and good for people. It's impossible to think withdrawal of their labour won't have a negative impact on members of the public as they are sick or have accidents. Well, so what you're actually measuring is the demand for more money on the one hand and bad patient outcomes on the other. So,
But ultimately, I find that tricky. Nobody in that essential service, whatever the essential service is, takes that decision lightly. I mean, going back to your point, Michelle, where you say, well, when you enter the service, you know what the salary restrictions are. Actually, during the course of your service, the salary in real terms might go down significantly. In my own industry, for example, the fire and rescue service, people's salaries, the average firefighter over the last 10 or so years has lost more than £4,000 in real terms in their salary. So whatever the situation was when they joined, the situation is getting progressively worse. Now, in a situation where you're in a cost of living crisis, an impending recession, there's no sign of any of this stuff improving. They're going to find it harder and harder to make ends meet and pay their bills. I just think it's naive in the extreme and unreasonable to expect them just to say...
I'm sure it'll reassure the person for whom the ambulance doesn't come that they've person who was going to drive it thought about it seriously.
And the truth is, history tells us that actually advances made for ordinary working people throughout the years have largely come about as a result of people having to fight for them, take to picket lines through their trade union campaigning. That's what gets people decent pay increases and decent conditions of service.
Well, there you go. Different opinions, strong opinions. Where do you sit on that matter? Get in touch. Tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your responses to that topic. But I also want to talk to you as well about just how many people suddenly have decided that their gender is completely at odds with their biological sex. What's going on? You tell me and I'll see you in two.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and the fireman, trade unionist and author Paul Embry. Welcome back, everybody. Lots of you guys getting in touch about that last conversation. We were just talking strikes, the so-called anti-strike laws, etc. Richard says, Michelle, you can see Mick Lynch knows the momentum is slowing down and public support is starting to crack. And when inflation starts to plunge, so will his position. Lots and lots of you. Robert says, Michelle, will you ask Paul if he thinks the military should be allowed to strike? Briefly, Paul, should the military be allowed to strike?
I haven't thought of that particularly in any great depth previously, but I'm happy to give it some thought.
He's going to get back. He'll get back to you on that.
The answer is no,
one.
isn't it? The answer is no. The army shouldn't be able to strike.
I'm not going to make a knee-jerk response to that. That would require a lot of thought. Instinctively, I would like to see every sector unionised with the right to strike, but I understand in extreme circumstances, in really extremists, it might not be possible. But let me give that some thought, and I'll get back to our viewer.
He's going to give it. He'll ponder it. Alex says no. I say absolutely not. What do you guys say, though? Malcolm says, as a customer paying for a service from a public sector, I expect a minimum service to be provided. Simple as that, says Malcolm. Lots of you guys getting in touch as well about the Elgin marbles. We'll come to that in just a few minutes. Jason, though, says, ban emergency services from striking completely, Michelle. End of, he says, the prison officers and police can't strike. So why the heck should the rest be allowed to? I don't know. You tell me. Lots of you also getting in touch about this next topic that I'm about to get into, which is the whole Census 2021 census. For the first time ever, was asking you the question about your gender identity. It was voluntary, I have to say, but a lot of people responded to it. Anyway, long story short, there's about 250,000 people, actually, in England and Wales that say that they identify as a different gender to their biological sex. Alex Dean, your thoughts?
I think that we're probably, despite the results of this of the census, I think we've probably gone past peak trans. I think that we've gone beyond the point at which people are able to use this as a rhetorical device in the public space and get their way without further discussion. I think that the notion that someone can declare themselves going from sex A to sex B and be treated uncritically as if that's true is no longer the case. So I think that whilst the number of people saying that this in the census has obviously gone up, I think that on the other hand, those who, and you know, there's going to be a vanishingly small group of people in society who genuinely need help and recognition, but for those people, they've achieved, with that, everything that they need has been achieved. For those who seek to destroy all meaning in language, or, you know, so you can't say what a woman is anymore, or those who wish to be able to use a man's advantages to dominate women's sports, or those who are men but wish to enter women's spaces, I think the game is up. So notwithstanding this result, as I say, I think we've gone beyond peak trans in society.
Paul Embry?
Well, let's call a spade a spade. It's bonkers, isn't it? Let's be blunt about it. And I think the average man and woman on the street see it as bonkers. I think the kind of radical progressives who are not a majority in our country, but by any stretch, but nonetheless wield such influence, are completely out of step with the views of the man on the Clapham omnibus, the man in the dog and duck, you know, whatever comparator you want to use. I suspect there's a certain element of social contagion going on as well. It almost seems there's a bit like nowadays a bit of a fashion accessory. You know, this kind of attempt to abolish the principle, effectively, you know, abolish the principle of biological sex. For some people, I think for a particular generation, they're kind of buying into it because they see it as something fashionable rather than
the notion
that
that
they truly feel and truly believe.
Parents, I feel.
But it's so worrying because the notion that biological sex doesn't exist is as absurd as flat earthism, which is a fringe position adopted by some people in the United States who demand to be heard and demand to have their voice listened to. But in our media in recent years, it has become utterly mainstream for a position as ridiculous as flat earthism to prevail. And that's why I say we've gone. That's how I say. Sorry to Paul. That's why I say we've gone beyond peak trans because it's not treated uncritically anymore.
But then how do you square that circle? And if you reckon we've gone past peak trans in Scotland, you will have seen that they've just passed this bill now, which basically says if you go and live for a few weeks as different gender, then there you go, Bob's your uncle. You're now that different gender.
But look at the public reaction to it. Once in a time, people were too afraid to say anything about this. Yeah, once it was raised, that was it. You weren't permitted anymore to say, you know, Tuesday comes after Monday. Yes, I think that the political class in this country is behind the popular will. Sometimes politics has to, you know, climate change, politics led public opinion. Politics, you know, drove the discussion and said we need to do this when maybe the majority of the public weren't of the same mind. But on this, the political class are mouthing things that are several years now out of date, I think.
And I think there's been an overreach from, if you like, the trans community and their supporters. Once upon a time, a few years ago, the demands were fairly limited. And I think the mainstream population, even if they didn't necessarily see any logic to what was being argued, they said, well, they're a small minority of people, let's not kick up a fuss. But as the demands became more and more outlandish and strident, then so, if you like, mainstream Britain decided to say, well, actually, we're going to push back against some of this stuff because it's got real implications for women's security, for example, women's privacy, security in public places, in the workplace and so on. And I think, you know, they've overplayed their hand. And as a result of that, there's now going to be a massive reaction. And I
agree with that.
And I suspect the reaction is only going to go in one way now. I think the argument in terms of the kind of gender extremism and fundamentalism has been defeated. They've lost the argument. They don't realise it yet, but they've lost the argument. I think it's only going to go in one direction.
I'm not sure I agree with you because at Christmas I was with all of my family and among which was a couple of my nieces, nephews, whatever. So ages about 12, 14. And we had this conversation. I mean, foolish. Who gets into this kind of conversation after a few beers? That's me, not the kids. But anyway, the kids was telling me that in their schools, all of them had examples of, I don't know, they used to have a classmate called Henry, and now they've been briefed, the school's been taken to a side, and now Henry is now Henrietta.
What are we doing to children?
But my point is, like, you guys are sitting here saying, oh, we're past peak trans, whatever. These children, my family members, and they're not unique, I'm sure, the kids were adamant.
Yes.
That, yes, Michelle, Henry is
ultimately, you
Henrietta.
can't buck science and you can't buck rationalism and you can't buck reality. And sooner or later, people who are peddling this stuff and people who are believing it, like that young generation of kids, reality will eventually hit them in the face. That's the truth of it. You can't forever get away with a situation where you constantly put feelings over facts. Sooner or later, reality is going to bite. And it may take a few years, but I think it's going to happen.
And the kind of people you're talking about, kind of young people you're talking about, will live to change their views on this as their contemporaries who have been indulged in a phase and therefore, you know, what we would once have written off as a phase or being a tomboy or whatever, or, you know, instead saying, right, I'm going to give you as a child life-changing amounts of medication from which you will not recover back to normality. That will not be regarded as the norm anymore, and the kind of generation you're talking about will live to see the regret about it.
Well, let me know your thoughts at home. Many of you getting in touch. Michael's been in touch and said, Michelle, how patronising are you? Just because people choose to be a nurse it doesn't make it OK to pay them poorly. He's referring to our conversation early on when I was just saying that actually I think if you work in like an emergency service, for example, I don't think you should be able to go on strike. That's not to say, by the way, that I think that everyone should be paid poorly and just suck it up. I don't think that at all. But surely, isn't there a balance? I don't know. Elisa has been in contact saying, your guests are perfect tonight. I respect both Paul and Alex, and I also think Alex should have his own show. Is Elisa your mum, by any chance?
I don't know who Lisa... No,
Lisa, that's one of my viewers.
But I like it. I accept.
Teresa says, Michelle, we're all struggling. You strikers are making it so much harder. You're very well paid and you're just greedy.
Well, when it comes to trained drivers, that's got to be right.
But hold
70k start...
Hold on a second here. People always go to the
He's not having it, Teresa.
People always go to the extreme example because they know that if they were to go to the average example, it would undermine their argument. Train drivers constitute a very, very, very tiny proportion of the number of workers who are on strike at the moment. Even with the RMT strike, the majority are people who work in the offices, work on the stations, cleaners, office clerks, for example. So the idea that all of these people are kind of raking it in and they're just out to get even more money than they already earn. I mean, even you know that's a nonsense.
I understand the rhetoric, but sadly
it's
to you,
not rhetoric,
we
it's
will.
Reality, it's
many of us will. You were just talking about reality coming back to bite. We will recall Aslef holding this country to ransom year after year. Just drivers.
Well, there you go. On the gender thing, Ian says gender is the latest must-have fashion accessory for students. In my day, he says, it was Falmouth flare jeans and vegetarianism. After that, it was Greta Thunberg, and now it's this, is it? I don't know, you tell me. Right, let's get cultured, everyone. Are you strapped in? I want to talk to you about the Elgin marbles. This is a debate that's rumbled on for centuries now. What should be the outcome of it, though? Is it time for them to be returned? Are they ours? Were they ever ours? And do you even care? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, with you until 7 o'clock tonight, alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and the fireman, trade unionist and author Paul Embry. If you've just joined, well, you've missed out. You've missed us talking about strikes and anti-strike law, about kids that seem to think that they're different genders to their biological sex. You've missed it all. And now I'm moving on because I want to talk about something cultured, so I do. And I'm interested as to how much interest you have in these kind of stories. So get in touch and tell me. I'm talking about treasures, in particular one that's currently owned by the British Museum. Some people would use the word owned and dispute that. And it's at the heart of a dispute that's gone on for centuries, the Elgin marbles, and who owns them and where should they be, etc., etc. George Osborne, that's kind of running the British Museum at the moment. Apparently he's having secret talks.
That's one of his jobs.
With Greece about where these should be. Many people are getting in touch and saying, I don't care. Why should I care? There's more important things to debate. Move on. Who cares about headless statues?
Yeah, I mean, amusingly, half of them seem to be saying to you, I don't care about it, give them back. Well, if you don't care, you can just ignore the debate, can't you? It is the job of those who are lucky enough to be entrusted to run our world-leading museums to preserve and improve their collections, not scheme behind closed doors to give them away. So it seems to me George Osborne is taking entirely the wrong tack here. Moreover, Paul was educating us about the laws on strikes and withdrawing your labour. The Parliament in this country specifically passed a law to stop things like this being given away. The British Museum Act of 1983, which is still good law, says you can't give stuff away out of the collection. So if George Osborne wanted to go around disposing of assets that somehow embarrass him, he should have stayed in politics.
But do you think that the UK is the rightful owner?
Yes, I do. Lord Elgin paid for them. We've got the receipt. You either believe in property rights or you don't.
Yes, but then this is the interesting thing. Let's make it about property rights. If you go on holiday and let me use your house for a little while, and whilst you're away, I decide to sell your house.
We've got one in Tuscany, by the way. I know that.
So I'm in your house whilst you're on holiday, and I decide to sell it to Paul Embry. Paul Embry's got all the receipts. I gave Michelle all this money for this house, but I didn't have the rights, perhaps, from you to sell your asset in the first place. Then how can he be the owner of it? Did you keep up with my analogy?
I did, and the trouble with your comparison about personal property rights, where it falls down, is we had that same discussion about looted things that were stolen from individuals by the Nazis and whether you can track those back and return them to their rightful owners, which are different to state assets, like these kinds of priceless artefacts, works of art, the Elgin marbles, that were sold by one state and via an individual acquired by another. The point is that the Ottomans, who ruled in Greece at the time, were there for longer than the formal existence of the United States of America. I mean, are we wrong to recognise the fake government in the fake country of the USA, which should be returned to the Native Americans?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that there weren't records found of the Ottoman actually giving permission to Elgin to basically flog these things.
To buy them, to look after them.
Yeah, am I right or am I wrong? I thought the reason people contest this is that they're saying you've got so much documentation from the Ottoman times, but nothing relating to this.
No, I think that's wrong. The Ottomans sold these to Elgin, and the dispute is whether they had the right to, which is a different discussion. By the way, you're not going to restore the Elgin marble, the Parthenon marbles as a whole, if you get the Elgin marbles to Greece. Half of them were lost in an explosion. This is how well they were being cared for before Elgin acquired them. And other parts are scattered all over Europe. So you're not going to get them back together, even if Britain gives them away for some reason.
Paul Embry.
I don't think you resolve arguments, culturally sensitive arguments like this, by recourse to legislation. I mean, I have to say, this is not like the Falkland Islands, where there would be massive implications from handing back something that we see as belonging to Britain. I think that where there is a case that has been made by a particular country, that artefacts or whatever that are now in the possession of another country and were acquired, I think probably through dubious means. I don't think it was necessarily as clear-cut as Alex is suggesting. And where those artefacts are culturally significant, I think there's a case to be made to say they should be handed back. I mean, look, the truth is they came from the Parthenon. They are Greek. If you were a Greek, I think you would have every right to say, look, those artefacts actually don't belong in London. They belong in Athens. And the Greeks, as I understand it, have actually spent a hell of a lot of time and effort over the last 30 or 40 years restoring the Parthenon and the Acropolis, and are now in a position to be able to ensure that if they took those marbles back, that they would be properly preserved and looked after. So, I mean, I have to say, I think the Greeks have made a good case. I do understand the argument there is a slippery slope potentially. You end up handing everything back. But I think where it's of particular cultural significance, where it causes tension, and where the country has made a reasonable case to say, look, these are ours, not yours, then I don't think it's unreasonable to say, actually have them back.
I don't think it's sensitive at all. They're just wrong. I mean, these marbles wouldn't go to the Parthenon anyway. They'd go from our museum to sit in their museum. The British Museum has about 6 million visitors a year. Their museum has 1.
But, I mean, do we know that? And even if that were the case...
Yes, definitely. That's their plan.
Well, I don't think it... I mean, even if that was so, I don't think that undermines the argument that they belong in Athens rather than belonging in London. I mean, they were not ours in the first place. Culturally, they're important to Greece and the Greek country. And I think it would be a good act of generosity and charity on our part to say, fair enough, we've had them long enough, have them back.
No thanks.
Wendy says, in capital, send them home with the UK's love and thanks for the years that we've had them. She says, I hate that so many people here do not care. We all should care. Oh, you'll hate me, Wendy.
I care. I just disagree with Wendy.
I don't care that much. Anyway, get in touch. Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address, and you can tweet me as well at Michelle Dewbs on Twitter. Now, the big H. If you're a regular viewer, you will know that my show is ordinarily an H&M free zone. I have very little interest in the antics of Prince Harry, but because I have one of his key lookalikes sat next to me, it'd be rude not to. So when I come back, let's get into it, shall we? What a mess. Tell me your thoughts. See you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock tonight. And alongside me, I've got the political consultant Alex Dean and the fireman, trade unionist and author Paul Embry. Good first half of the show. It went so quickly, says one of my viewers. So far, Alex Dean has put his water down and broken Paul Embry's necklace. However, they both have worthy views, so it does remain to be seen who ends up in the dog bowl.
Yeah,
that's one of my viewers. That's one of my viewers there. There you go. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the subject that I try and avoid at all costs, actually. Denise says, Michelle, can we sit and talk about your jacket instead of H&M? Trust me, I'd quite like to, but alas, it's only the last 10 minutes, so let's indulge it here. I'm talking about Prince Harry. It's an absolute mess, isn't it? I mean, there's so much stuff going on at the moment. We can, I mean, pick whichever bit of it you want to pick up on.
So Prince Harry said today he wants to reconcile with his family. I don't know about you, but if I want to mend fences with somebody, the first thing I do is write a book slagging them off. That is key to getting off on the right foot in reconciling. It's a bit like ensuring your privacy by signing up for a new Netflix series that you're going to present, airing your views. Key to all these things. The criticism Harry's coming in for today is boasting about killing 25 Taliban. And that is what he boasted about, and that is the story that's being discussed today. It seems to me that we all knew it was the job of our armed forces in that conflict to kill the Taliban members, and I respect his service, which would normally be discussed privately amongst comrades or with your family. So it's hardly a surprise that a serving member of our armed forces killed the Taliban when they were deployed to do just that. Whether he looks like a crass braggart is another question.
Paul?
Well, I'm no royalist and I've got no particular affection for the royal family. But I have to say, I think the way he has conducted himself, the things that he's said, the things that he's done, and his wife have been pretty atrocious. I think going on global television and writing a best-selling book, as it almost certainly will be, and trashing your own flesh and blood and revealing some of the most intimate details about your relationships with them, I think is actually unforgivable. And the truth is, look, we all have arguments in our families. I've had arguments and fights with my brother over the years. It happens. That's what happens in families. But to do what he's done in terms of washing the dirty linen in public and parading all of the sordid details in the global media, I think is unforgivable. And if the truth is, as Alex said that they wanted a life of privacy. And actually, everything they've done since has been the very opposite of the life of privacy that they craved. And it seems to me that they've chosen a life of celebrity over service. They didn't particularly want to cut ribbons and open hospitals and go to old people's homes. They'd rather live in Los Angeles and fire shots across the Atlantic in the way that they're doing. And I do think the whole thing is very unseemly, number one, but inexcusable, number two.
People do strange things for money, don't they? And I just think this is all a shame. And I think we have not seen the last of this yet. Someone else had just been in touch saying, Michelle, you've just been talking about the marbles. You can send them to Harry because he seems to have lost his. I've got to say, I don't disagree with you too much on that one. Mark says, Michelle, I cannot bear you talking about H&M. I've muted my telly, so can you give me a wave when you finish talking about him? Double wave to you, because that's all I can pretty much handle. So unmute your telly now if you want. Sean says, Michelle, send the marbles back. Basically, they were stolen. They belong in Greece, or if not, she'll have them for the garden. Phil says, yeah, they should rightly be back in the original place for everyone to see Greek achievements far beyond other people of the time. Les, so you should basically break the marbles down. I could use them for my patio, says Les.
Which is what a number of people around there did. They broke it up to burn bits. They broke it up to put in their houses. What a great care they were taken care of before Elgin got them.
It was a long time ago, though, Alex. I mean, they're not going to be doing that now, are they?
Well, Class says the UK has enough loose marbles in the House of Commons. Thank you very much. And Nick, on a similar vein, says, I think we've already lost our marbles. There you go. Nicholas says, I've only just tuned in. Is that Prince Harry there giving his views? Love your show. Have you ever done any Prince Harry lookalike work?
I haven't, but I have to say, one year, the London Fire Brigade held its annual Christmas Carol service inside Westminster Cathedral, and I was a senior official in the Fire Brigades Union at the time, and some wag sat me about 3 seats from Prince Harry. So as I was walking up the aisle to take my seat, you could see people getting ready to do selfies, and when they saw it was me, they realised, actually, I'm a bit better looking, so it can't be Harry.
I like it. You could be a lookalike. I could be your agent. We would make a fortune. I could pimp you out. It'd be excellent.
Let's do it.
Stuart says, all my time in the army, you're always asked by civvies, have you ever killed anyone? There is an unwritten law that if you are asked, you always say no, whether you have or not. Interesting insight there. Coming up, by the way, at 7 o'clock. In fact, actually, I must just say thank you very much. You two have very much enjoyed the debate today, and I've enjoyed your company at home. But up next is Bev Turner. Good evening to you, Bev. Happy Friday. What have you got for us?
Good evening, Michelle. They've let me on in the evening. Great show, by the way. Thank you. Right. I've got a lot coming up tonight. We've had these two big speeches this week from Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. We're going to be comparing them and how they kind of contrasted with each other, with someone in the red and someone in the blue corner. We've been talking about Prince Harry. I know that viewer has now probably turned his sound down again, but we have to discuss this. I have the most incredible psychotherapist coming into the studio. She's brilliant, and she's going to tell us what might be going on in Harry's mind. And then I've got Richard Tice, leader of the Reform Party, coming in at the end, and I'm going to grill him a little before the end of the show, so don't go anywhere.
Ah, sounds good. I've got to be honest, I'm going to the pub, but the beauty of GB News is that you can take us with you. So if you are out and about, you're heading off, put us on your radio. Listen to us there instead. Thank you once again, everyone. Whatever you're doing, have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you on Monday.
Good evening. Many of us have had a dry Friday, but the first weekend of the year will be dominated by showers. Lots of showers, often heavy, coming through on a fairly gusty wind, and it'll start to turn a little cooler as well. Pretty mild tonight, but we're kind of between weather systems, or have been through the day, which is why most of us have been dry. But these weather fronts now edging in from the west are bringing wet conditions. Some quite heavy rain moving across Northern Ireland into Scotland, and particularly for South Wales and South West England. That heavy rain through the early hours could cause a few problems, so we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place.